Okay, it's 5 after 10, so I want to make sure we get all of the information out to you within the hour and to have time for Q&A. So we're going to get started. Welcome to the PPP EIDL Q&A with Rod Johnson from SBA. I'm Heidi Shepard. I'm the project director for the DC Women's Business Center. Thank you for joining us today. Just a couple of housekeeping tips. Please make sure your phones are muted. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll address them at the end of Rod's presentation, which we will monitor. Also, to let you know, we are recording this and the recording will be shared post the webinar. So thanks again for joining. I just would like to introduce Rod Johnson. He's the Lender Relations Small Business Development Center Officer at the Washington Metropolitan Area District Office of SBA. He's a native Washingtonian with over 30 years of experience in the not-for-profit board governance, banking, business banking, commercial lending experience, government contracting, credit analyst, relationship manager, loan workout specialist, and team leader at various banks. He holds a bachelor's degree in business administration and master's of science degree in financial management. As the project officer for the SBA Small Business Development Center Lending Relationships, he serves the Washington, D.C. metro area, as does the DC Women's Business Center. So please join me in welcoming Rod. I just wanted to also, before Rod chimes in, hang on, just wanted to go through our few slides about the Washington, D.C. Women's Business Center. We're part of a national network of women's business centers across the country, designed to empower women to achieve small business success. We provide training, mentoring, business development, and financing opportunities. Our mission is really to help women build resilient and successful businesses, strengthening their community's economy and creating wealth for their families. We've been around since 2010, partially funded by the SBA and supported by the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. Just wanted to inform you about some upcoming webinars and workshops and you can register for them at our website, dcwbc.org. We have many coming up and more in the queue. Banking relationships, how and why, and you will hear from Rod just again how important it is to have a banking relationship at this time. Also innovative digital marketing for 2021, taxes and accounting for small businesses. Again, very significant at this time in terms of putting your documents in a row for getting loans. How to start a successful online store, health and safety during COVID for families and small businesses, and writing a business plan. So please visit our website for more information and to register for these upcoming and very important and timely events. And here is Rod. You can see his picture, but also you probably see him on the screen. You can see his motto, open the bank's vault doors for local growing and profitable business. And I'm going to hand it over to Rod for him to start his presentation.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Heidi. Good morning, everyone. It's a great day, and it's a great day. Why? Because there is so much money between your state and local governments and the money that the federal government has available. So before we get into the nuances of PPP 2.0, I want to start off with the Debt Relief Act. And actually, that's toward the end of the program, but I want to start off with that, but we'll stay at this slide because as of 2 days ago, if you currently have a 504, 7A, or microloan for 3 months, the SBA will pay the bank your principal and interest payments on those loans, okay? Now you're supposed to be automatically enrolled, so I would call my bank and find out if in fact you are enrolled so that you can receive assistance with your cash flow. Secondly, if you get approved a new 7A, 504, or microloan, then the SBA on your behalf will pay 6 months worth of principal and interest on that new loan, starting February 1st through, and the loan has to be closed by September 30, 2021. So I think that's a great deal. Now, the banks also have more incentive to make loans to you. So for example, with the SBA Express, it used to be $350,000. That was the maximum. Now the maximum is $1 million. Now, the banks used to receive a 50% guarantee from the SBA. Now they receive a 75% guarantee from the SBA. For the 504 program, generally, which is up to $5 million, generally the bank received a 75% guarantee. Now the banks will receive a 90% guarantee to do your deal. Here's the other thing. Normally you pay fees, right? The borrower pays fees for these SBA loans. Well, now you as the borrower, you do not have to pay any fees. The fees used to be rolled into the loan amount. Now you don't have to worry about that at all. So the banks have incentive to do your deal. You don't have to pay any loan fees. On your behalf, if you get a new 7A504 or microloan, the SBA will pay 6 months worth of principal and interest. And right now, if you have one of those 3 loans, then you're able to receive 3 months of principal and interest payments. And I think that's fantastic. Okay. Now, you also have available, if you qualify, PPP 2.0 or the EIDL grant or another EIDL loan, depending on where your business is located. All right, so there's the first draw and the second draw under this new legislation, which is 5,600 pages long, okay? So in the presentation, I have provided the page numbers for various topics that you may want to look up in the actual legislation, and you can go right to it, okay? But that's later in the presentation. All right, so qualification for the second draw. Congress heard you, right? Because you guys were concerned about Ruth Chris and Shake Shack and some of the other large employers getting loans. Well, now it's 300 or fewer employees, businesses and nonprofits, and you can borrow up to $2 million provided you can demonstrate a 25% or greater decline in gross revenues during any 1 quarter period, 2020 compared to the same quarter of 2019. So for example, let's pick September 30, 2019 versus September 30, 2020. You should show a 25% decline in revenue. The key is now, whether it's QuickBooks, compiled or reviewed quality financial statements, you must sign and date those statements to verify the veracity of the numbers that you're handing to the bank. If those statements are not signed and dated, the bank is going to hand it back to you and it'll slow down processing your loan. So make sure you sign off and date those statements. Now, PPP 1.0 is still open, okay? Now, what it says is you must have spent all of the PPP 1 money before you can apply for PPP 2.0, all right? Now, if you're having problems with using all the money, just bonus it to your employees and call it hazard pay, okay? Now, even though this is not written in the ruling, the bank may want you to submit a forgiveness form for PPP 1.0. Again, it's not in the interim financial ruling. However, the bank may want you to still submit a forgiveness application, all right? And make sure you are ready to do that. Now, there is a new forgiveness form, which I'll talk about later. It's the 3508S form, where now it has been improved. Instead of $50,000 and below, it is $150,000 and below. If you didn't take advantage of the PPP the first time, now you have what we call the first draw. But under the first draw, the original rules for PPP apply, okay? So that means that you can have no more than 500 employees and you can still get up to $10 million maximum loan amount, which I think is great. Normally procrastination doesn't pay off, but in this case it does. All right. So you're under the original terms of the PPP1 under the first draw because you didn't participate the first time. All right, next slide, please. So you have the calculation. And actually the calculation, and hopefully you'll use these slides as your guide when you're filling out your loan application, okay? So the loan amount and the calculation is the same, right? So it's going to be 2.5 times your monthly average payroll in 2019 or 2020, whichever one is the highest, because you want to be able to maximize the loan amount. So you're going to choose whichever payroll was higher, okay? So just keep that in mind. For you self-employed, meaning single member LLC, sole proprietorship, and 1099 contractors, you're going to look at the Schedule C, right? So you file a 1040 with the Schedule C. So you're going to look at line 31. And what you're going to do is take that net profit divided by 12 times 2.5, and that'll give you your loan amount. Now, the payroll cost, remember that 40%, remember now, 60% is to be used for payroll, 40% for operating costs. Well, the costs have now been expanded that you can use the PPP money for, okay? So, same as before, gross pay for US residents up to $100,000 for the year, plus the employer's share of insurance, health insurance, dental, vision, disability, and life. So I've given you an example here where you can see the number of employees, 356, the gross pay, the ceiling at 100,000 for those people that are making over 100. Okay, then you see your health insurance retirement plan, and you see that I have it in the box, okay, which that has been expanded, disability and life insurance, your state unemployment, and total payroll cost, okay, for PPP. So now your average monthly payroll is going to be $25,633, and you're going to multiply that times 2.5, and you're going to come out with, I'm old now, I think it's going to be 64,000 and some change, if I'm doing that right in my head, okay? And we'll see that on the slide further down. Next slide, please. So here, what it's showing you, if you have a NAICS code in the 72 plus, and when I say plus, it could be 72119, okay? But this is for hospitality and restaurants, okay? And you can pull your NAICS code off of your tax return. That's usually in the upper left-hand side of the tax return. But instead of using 2.5, it's going to be 3.5 times, okay? And so what I've done here is I've given you some of the NAICS codes, like for food service contractors, drinking places, if you will. Everybody has a watering hole, restaurants and other eating places. So I've given you some of the NAICS codes that you can use if you're in the hospitality or restaurant business. But you get to use a 3.5 times multiplier instead of a 2.5 times multiplier. Next slide, please. And I think you should, because the restaurant business and hospitality business has been hit hard. Now, let me say this from the onset. The rules say 60-40, 60% payroll, 40% expenses. If you are a single member LLC, 1099, or sole proprietorship, understand that you can use 100% of the PPP to pay yourself, okay? And you pretty much can guarantee that you'll get 100% forgiveness if you do that. All right, so now that I've said that, let's get back on track. So you have now expanded non-payroll expenses. So remember, under the original plan, it was gas, water, electric, business internet, business telephone, business transportation, interest on a commercial mortgage, okay? Well, now we have 4 new categories under this new legislation. So you have operating expenses. So now, if you've purchased software for payroll, inventory tracking, accounting, i.e. QuickBooks, or a CRM, you can now include that as part of your 40% expenses. If there was damage done to your property that was not covered by your insurance because of vandalism, looting, a public disturbance like we had here in DC not long ago, then the portion that's not covered by your insurance can be included. You can use PPP money for that, okay? Worker protection expenses, COVID-19 testing, protective gear, face masks, what do you call it? Hand sanitizer, what I call the new outdoor pop-ups, right? And barriers and, new drive-throughs. The PPP money can be used for that. And then for supply expenses like restocking the shelves and products, you can use the money for that. Now, here's a little nuance. If you've submitted your PPP 1.0 loan for forgiveness, you cannot go back and pick up this new category of expenses. However, if you have not applied for the PPP and you're having a hard time using the PP1 money, then you can go back and pick up these expenses, okay, and add it to your 40% to use all the money so that you can apply for PPP 2.0. So I've given you two ways if you're having a hard time using up your PPP1 money. One is to bonus it out, right, to your employees, or two, go back and pick up these 4 categories of expenses, and that would probably help you actually be able to use up all the money, okay? All right, next slide, please. All right, so there was improvements to the forgiveness process. So now they say it's a 1 page, it's really 3 pages. Page 1 is the actual form itself, okay? It's the forgiveness form. Page 2 and 3 are actually the instructions on how to complete the form, all right? So now the form will say $150,000 and below. If you recall, we had a 3508 short form or S form, and that was for loans 50,000 and below. Then we had the 3508 EZ form, which handled loans that were $50,001 up to $2 million. And then we had the 3508 long form, which were $2 million up to $10 million. Well, out of the $525 billion that was put on the street from PPP 1.0, 87% of those loans were actually $150,000 and below. Hence, you have the new form, S form, for $150,000 and below for forgiveness, okay? The documentation, you still need to show that 25% reduction in gross revenues. Here's something key that Congress fixed. The idle advance will not be deducted from your forgiveness amount, and I'll talk about that a little later. All right, so now you have a flexible end date. So the loan coverage period can end on any date after the loan origination date between 8 and 24 weeks. The PPP1 loan coverage period has been extended through March 31st. So if you recall, when PPP first came out, okay, between April 2nd and June 4th, you had to use the money in 8 weeks, and then you would ask for forgiveness. Then the prior president signed into law the PPP Flexibility Act, which then extended it out to 24 weeks, okay? Well, now that 24 weeks has been even extended until March 31st, 2021, okay? So you even have now a longer runway, and well, now we're into 2021 to actually apply for that forgiveness for PPP 1.0, all right? Now, there were 2 things that Congress also fixed, as they're calling it here, the tax clarification. If you remember, originally, when this product came out, the loan, when it was forgiven, was to be a non-taxable event. The problem is Congress forgot to tell the IRS that, okay? And so the IRS was sending out notices saying that once these loans are forgiven, it becomes a taxable event. Well, Congress fixed that loophole, and it is no longer a taxable event. The second issue was the 40% of the PPP money that you use to pay expenses, it was supposed to still be deductible on your business tax return, But again, Congress forgot to tell IRS that. So now that's been fixed. So the money, PPP money you use to pay expenses under that 40% umbrella, it can now be shown up on your tax return, business tax return. Two loopholes that were actually fixed, okay, in this round of legislation. Next slide, please. Now, who's eligible? Well, now you have 501c6s that are eligible, destination marketing organizations, newspapers, TV, radio, public broadcasters are now eligible. If you are in bankruptcy proceedings, meaning a Chapter 11, not a Chapter 7, a Chapter 11, then the PPP loan takes precedence, right? It moves to first position automatically over all the other creditors. I think here it uses the word supersedes, okay? It supersedes any other and every other claim. So the business should not be permanently shut down, which is what basically a Chapter 7 is, right? A liquidation. So you can't be in Chapter 7, you can be in Chapter 11. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so there are targeted loans. If you recall, we heard a lot of information around women and minority businesses were not able to fully participate in PPP 1.0, okay? Now, Congress heard you. So here's what happened. On July 11th, 12th, and 13th, the CDFIs, the certified development companies, the minority deposit institutions, right, and microloan intermediaries, they were the first to open their portals to women and other minorities, okay? Then I think it was on the 13th through the 15th, community banks defined as 1 million or less in assets, they opened up their portals, okay, to women and minority-owned companies so that they could participate in the program first before it was opened up the following week. The portals were opened up the following week by all the banks for all the businesses across the country to take advantage of this $284 billion that was passed. Congress also heard you, again, about the larger companies getting a share of money. So this is what they did. Businesses with 10 or fewer employees located in a mid to low income area who never received a PPP loan, $15 was specifically set aside, right, for those businesses. Businesses with 10 or fewer employees located in a mid to low income area who did get a PPP loan, but now on a second draw, there was $25 billion out of the $284 billion set aside. So if my math is correct in my head very quickly, that's $40 billion that's been set aside for companies with 10 or fewer employees, you know, located in the lower mid income area. Okay, now the maximum loan amount is $250,000. The SBA will actually verify, next slide please, the SBA will actually verify the identity of your business, and then the money will come to you via ACH. Now this is the actual loan application. Now remember when we did the average, and I want you to fix your eyes on that monthly average payroll. Remember that we saw that example I gave you in the expanded expense payroll section with disability insurance and life insurance, and it came up to $25,633. And in my head, I was trying to do the math. Well, here it is. So you do the 2.5 times, and it's $64,082. Okay. And so as you see this form, it's very easy to complete. The business legal name, you know what your NAICS code is because you're going to look in your tax return in the upper left-hand corner. And I think it's like item B, if I recall. And you put in your NAICS code. You already know it. You can do the average monthly payroll yourself because you have that number. And all you have to do is multiply times 2.5, and you know what your loan amount is going to be. So you don't have to rely on the bank to actually calculate that for you. You can do it. You have the loan application here, so you can use this as your guide as you do it yourself, right? And if you remember a few slides back, we had an illustration with the number of employees. In this case, it was 3. So you just plug it in and then you just click, you just, for the purpose of the loan, you just put a check mark in all the things that you use the money for, okay? Now, you can see the URL for the first draw application and the second draw application. I'll just tell it to you now. The address is sba.gov/PPP, and it will have a drop down for the forgiveness form, the first draw form, the second draw form, the interim financial rulings, the actual 5,600 page legislation. It'll have all that there at your fingertips. All right. Next score, please. Next slide, please. Now, if you don't have a bank, the SBA has a list of lenders and you have the URL there. Also, if you don't have a bank, we'll give you, there's a list, and that's also at sba.gov/PPP. If you don't remember it or remember any of this, you can do that. And all of this will come up. Okay, all of this will pull up under that. Now, if you want to know who the top Maryland or DC lenders are, it says Maryland here, but there's lenders too. Bank of America, Cabbage, PNC, M&T Bank should be on here. M&T Bank, okay. And in fact, all of them are very proficient at processing these loans 150,000 and below. All right, next slide, please. So now you have the EIDL loan, which has been extended through December 31st. Now remember, there are 2 parts to EIDL. There's the EIDL loan, which is a 30-year loan, okay? The payments are deferred for the first 12 months. It's interest, the interest is accruing. There is no prepayment penalty if you pay it off early. If you want an increase, here's the email address here, and then the subject line, you put increase. Remember, there's nothing forgivable about the EIDL loan, okay? Unlike PPP, which is why I like the EIDL loan, is that there's not this 60-40 split that you have to adhere to. You can use the money toward payroll or your operating expenses as you see fit. The company has to be located in the US of A and have less than 500 employees. If you've already applied for EIDL, you cannot get the EIDL advance. And if you remember, the EIDL advance is a grant, okay? The advance is only available on an emergency basis. Next slide, please, and in a target area. So how do you actually qualify for the EIDL loan grant, right, in low-income communities? So you got to be a part of a census tract. That's either 20% or more of the population lives in poverty, or the median or metro area income is 80% or less, okay? Here's a link, and you just go to that link, put in your business zip code, and you'll find out if you fall within the census tract. All right. Or you have to show a 30% drop. Unlike PPP, which is 25, you got to show a 30% drop. So this is where having your financial statements come into play. And then the SBA will issue a maximum grant amount of $10,000 to the applicant, which is forgivable, and it doesn't have to be paid back. So if you meet these 2 qualifications, then you'll get the EIDL grant, okay? All right, next slide, please. So there's the loan, right? There's the EIDL emergency loan. So businesses not in a low-income community, this is how you're eligible. You received an EIDL loan, but you never received the grant. And early on, a lot of people did receive the loan, but they didn't go back and apply for the grant. All right, you qualify for the EIDL, but you never applied for either the loan or the grant, which I understand why companies didn't do that, but there are plenty of them out there that did. Now, this program has been funded to the tune of $20 billion. Once the SBA verifies your information, it has 21 days to put the money into your account, okay? Just so you know. All right. And this grant, and you can go to the next slide, and this grant is actually a non-taxable event. Now, this is the debt relief program that I mentioned at the top of the, top of the presentation. microloans, 7 loans, and 504 loans, right? The SBA will make 3 months worth of payments on the existing SBA loans, or for a new loan, one of those three, the SBA will make 6 months worth of principal and interest payments on those loans. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. And what's the key to that is, and you can go to the next slide because we talked about this, but the key to that is there are no fees that you will have to pay. Now, this grant for live event operators, there was supposed to be yesterday at 4 o'clock, more granular information that was supposed to come out about this. And I was going to send it out to everybody, but I checked this morning and it hasn't really come out yet. So there'll be more granular details about this to come. But, you know, your jazz clubs like Blues Alley, your movie theaters like AMC, your museums, and comedy clubs like the Improv, right, and Broadway play venues that charge ticket admissions for an event are actually eligible for this, okay? Now, these organizations must have been in operation since February 29, 2020, with less than 500 full-time employees and experienced a 25% reduction in revenues, okay? The grant amount is 45% of the 2019 annual revenues, if existed before 2019, or 6 months of the average revenues in 2019, if existed after January 1st, 2019. Now, with this program, they cannot have received a PPP loan, well, I guess it's been a month ago now, as of December 26, 2020. The grant money has to be used the same way as the normal PPP, 60% payroll, 40% expenses. However, for this program, they can include marketing, ads, staging, and other event expenses, okay? And they have a fixed covered period of March 1st, 2021 to December 31st. And lastly, there will be grants at 50% extended through June 20th. Again, there's going to be more that comes out about this, but you see the URL at the bottom that you can go to, and there's some FAQs there that you'll be able to have access to. So next slide, please. So this is my favorite slide, okay? Because however you look at it, I had to read through the 5,600 pages of the legislation. I did focus on section 300, which is where the PPP, most of the PPP information was. However, you know, if you can't go to sleep, if you want to know about, grants for live event operators, it's on page 2124. If you want to know about the 25% drop in the documentation you need, it's on page 2079. Okay. If you want to know about PPP 2.0, it's on page 2064. So what I've given you here is, when you go to SBA.gov PPP, and you want to pull down the 5,600 pages of legislation, here are the page numbers where you can find the specific information that you're looking for. Happy reading. It's not fun. I've had to do it. All right, next slide, please. All right, so here's some SBA partner resources. Of course, you see right there, the Women's Business Center at the top. You know, you have SCORE, you have the SBDCs. On the left here, you have the email address for the Office of Disaster Assistance, along with their telephone number. And then, yeah, they give you a URL here, but the easiest one to remember is sba.gov/PPP, and it'll pull up all this information that it's talking about for PPP, EIDL, and debt relief. Go ahead to the next slide. I think that should be, the scams. Yes, how can I forget? The SBA will not be calling you and asking you for an EIN number, your social security number. If you receive something from SBA.com or Treasury.com, since we work in conjunction with the Treasury, you know that it's a scam, okay? So know that, because we've been getting a lot of calls about scams. So that should be it. Next slide, please. I think that should be it. Oh, the breakdown. You can skip this slide. Nobody cares about this slide. And that's it. So we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Rod. There are 3 questions that came in the
Oh, wow.
Q&A section.
30.
So I'm going 3. So I'm going to read the questions to you. Somebody writes in, if I'm a self-employed person and I have 1 employee whom I issued a Form 1099 at the end of the year, what should I put for number of employees on my PPP form?
Well, the 1099 is not an employee, so it's 0.
So if you're self-employed, you don't count yourself as an employee.
Well, the question was, do I include my 1099? So
right.
No, you don't.
Okay.
Because at 1099, they can go and apply for PPP and idle for themselves. Okay. So remember the formula that's in the PowerPoint here. So on line 31, for you self-employed person, you're going to do that net profit divided by 12 times 2.5. Okay. That's why I put it there. I know you're going to post these slides, hopefully, or send them to whomever wants them. But that's why it's in there, so that you can actually do that calculation, okay, yourself.
Okay. Here's another question. I started a consulting business right before the pandemic hit and had to let my 2 employees go. Am I still eligible for PPP 1.0?
All right, so you're asking about the first draw. So actually, under the guidelines, all you have to show is a 25% drop between 2018 and 2019. So you're going to be fine as long as you were in business by February 15th, 2020. Okay.
Okay. She said, I did not apply for the first draw.
Right. That's right. So now, well, yeah. So now you're applying now. So it will be considered the first draw. Right. And so as long as you show the 25% reduction, which I'm pretty sure you can, then you'll be okay. You just have to submit the documentation.
Awesome. Okay, so I applied for an EIDL last year between June and July, but SBA denied my loan application because I did not submit that documentation on time, 1 day late or incorrectly. Should I reapply for the EIDL again?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So this time when you get the email that says, okay, supply XYZ, be on time.
If I applied for the EIDL loan already and got approved, can I apply for it again?
In the slide, it said, yes, you can. You're going to put, and it gave you the email address, and you put increase, right? You put increase in the subject line. And remember, it's capped at 150. But the short answer is yes. But in the slides, it tells you exactly how to do that.
Okay.
You gotta love these slides. You gotta love the slides. All right, go ahead.
The slides will be shared, by the way, and the recording. Somebody said, I got the EIDL in 2020. Can I apply for another one in 2021?
Yes.
Okay. And somebody wrote, I didn't get the EIDL grant because funds ran out. So will I be eligible for the grant, and how will SBA contact me? Okay, so now remember, you're going to have to be in a low to moderate income area. And yes, it did run out. It was funded last year to the tune of $20 billion, the EIDL grant. And yes, we did run out of money. But now Congress is taking a more targeted approach. And so you have to be in that census tract, all right, to be able to qualify for the money, 1. But 2, yes, the Office of Disaster Assistance will contact you to let you know if you're eligible or not. Okay, the person who asked about the consulting business, if they're eligible for PPP, asks if the EIDL grant would work for her. If you're in the targeted area, yes. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? I'm not seeing other questions. Anybody else have other questions? Okay, here's somebody. If I got an EIDL loan last year, can I get the grant this year and still apply for PPP? Self-employed person.
You can still apply for PPP. You're fine. You have the calculations, right, at your disposal. Remember, the EIDL is more targeted money, okay? That's the key to understand about EIDL, the EIDL Advance, is that it's more targeted this time to low and mid-income communities.
Any other questions? How are we on time? We still have 15 minutes.
Now, I will
there's another
say,
question.
you know, we may not like the way Congress is acting on some other issues, but I will say that they did try this time, right? Because they heard us. They said, you know, women and minorities didn't have an opportunity, right, last time. So now, as you saw here in the slides, they really targeted $40 billion out of that 284 just for that, right? If you're located in a low to moderate income area, there's been money segregated out just for those areas.
So here's another question. Who will approve my application for the EIDL?
All right, so that comes out of the Office of Disaster Assistance that's in Fort Worth, Texas. And they're the ones that actually approve it. I can tell you, because when I started with the SBA, that's where I started in the Office of Disaster Assistance, but they had an office here in headquarters in Washington, D.C. And I worked on the Hurricane Maria and, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the other one, but I worked on 2 hurricanes and I had Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Those were the 2 areas that I had, okay? And it was absolutely crazy in the Office of Disaster Assistance because you are getting applications after applications. And as you saw on the slide here, you're trying to verify the information, okay? And so here's a tip. I'm glad we're talking about EIDL, all right? So here's a tip. So some of the mistakes that are common, even when I was in the Office of Disaster Assistance. So you're a single member LLC, sole proprietorship, okay, or a 1099 contractor. So the first mistake is you are giving the Office of Disaster Assistance your routing number and account number for your personal checking account instead of your business checking account, right? Because you're thinking, oh, I'm a sole proprietor, you know, so it doesn't matter. I'm a single member LLC, so it doesn't matter. So when we go to verify that information, obviously it doesn't match up because we're looking for your business name, okay? And we see the personal name. So now that shuts down the process, okay? So now we have to come back to you and think about the millions and literally millions of applications that come through there. Because as of like November, and this was the last stat I had for EIDL, there were 6 million applications that came through, okay? 6 million that came through. So anytime that there's a mistake on your application, it slows down the process, okay? The second mistake is that, and I have to chuckle at this because I know you know the name of your business, but you really don't know the name of your business. So this is what I mean. So it could be Rod Johnson and Associates, Inc. That's what's on the certificate of good standing and on the articles. But what did I do? I just put Rod Johnson and Associates. So now when I check the databases, right, with the EIN number to match up with the name, it doesn't match up, right? Because I haven't put the name that matches the certificate of good standing in the articles. So again, that slows down the process, all right? So let's make sure that you put the proper business name on the application.
Very important, very important.
It's really important. Okay.
Okay, we have 2 more questions.
All right, so I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I wanted to make sure. I just wanted to make sure they got it. So go ahead.
Got it. Okay, so somebody writes, can I advise my clients to apply for second idle or request an increase? Is
Yes,
there a time limit to request an increase?
like yesterday, like basically as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah,
Somebody says, I didn't receive the first loan and I just registered my business in DC. Although I've been in business, I wasn't sure on the paperwork side of it. I wasn't aware I qualified. Do I now qualify as the self-employed business owner with no employees yet? What would be the first steps I take to get in contact with a lender?
well, PPP, you're not going to be, right? Because you had to be in business by February 15, 2020. So that knocks you out already for PPP. For idle, okay, you can.
Yeah.
PPP, no.
Okay. I'm looking to see if I missed any questions. Any more questions? Please put them in the chat box. We have a few more minutes. We'd be happy to answer your questions.
Now, sometimes the people in the Office of Disaster Assistance will send you a form. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to be optimistic that you guys have filed your 2019 tax returns with the Schedule C, because that was another issue. Because when the Office of Disaster Assistance asked for that 2019, there were a whole lot of people that had not filed their 2019 tax returns, the 1040 with the Schedule C. So I'm going to be optimistic and hope by now that we're in 2021 that you have filed the finalization of that 1040 with the Schedule C, okay? Because it's going to be requested. Because remember, you have to show a 30% drop for idle.
Let's see. Will the idle grant be subtracted from my PPP for loan forgiveness?
No, remember in the slide, it said that it's no longer, that's something that Congress fixed. So no, it will not. That no longer applies. Is there another, because I want to kind of go off a little bit on that forgiveness for the grant. Okay, so for those of you that applied early for your forgiveness and you had a advance, so for example, you may have had 100,000 PPP and a $10,000 advance. You went for forgiveness for 100,000. The SBA only approved the 90,000. Why? Because the 10,000 wasn't subtracted by the bank when you got the PPP. So now the bank is telling you you owe them $10,000 at 1% over 5 years. In this legislation, that was fixed, okay? So the SBA will actually be giving the bank a credit on your behalf to wipe out that $10,000. So my message to you is don't worry about it, and the banks already know that. So if that happens to you, don't go in a tizzy. We already know about it, and Congress has fixed it.
Okay, I have another question here. What if I didn't show a profit for 2019 and 2020? Can I still apply for PPP and idle?
No need. Well, no need for PPP, because remember, it's line 31 on the Schedule C, and if you have a negative number there, you don't have anything to divide, right? You can't divide a negative number and come. So no, not for PPP. For idle, you can, because we're not looking at net profits for idle. Okay, it's the gross profit for idle.
Okay, any more questions? We still have Rod here for another 5 minutes.
And in some ways, actually the idle, even though it's capped at 150,000, is better because you're not dependent on that net profit number on line 31 from the Schedule C.
Any more questions, folks?
But I am encouraging you to apply because we've already gone from 284 billion and we're down to it, I say
249 billion?
49, yeah, yep.
Right, so get your applications in quickly, get your documents together quickly, work with your SBDC, your SCORE, Women's Business Center, to get your documents in a row. Here's another question. If I don't have tax returns for 2019, do I still apply for EIDL?
See, didn't we just talk about that? I mean, I just literally talked about that. You need to file. You need to file your 2019. Because
Okay.
see, here's what's going to happen. So they're going to send you a form, the 4506T, right? And so what are they going to ask for? 2019, 2017, 2018, 2019. Okay. So get that 2019 filed.
2019, absolutely. So here's another question. I'm not sure what a PIA is, but she asks, if I'm getting PIA, can I still apply for EIDL?
Is that,
What is PIA?
isn't that some type of unemployment insurance? I thought.
Marshall, can you clarify that for us? You can
Yeah,
unmute
verify.
or you can.
Because that's what I think.
I think it's maybe PUA.
It's how much you earned.
Unemployment?
Yeah, PUA, the unemployment that was just for, I think it's for contractors.
That's what I thought. It was unemployment. Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought. All right, you can't double dip. It's one or the other, right? It's one or the other. You can't double dip.
Okay, great. Other questions? Any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, wait a minute, looks like there's another question. Oh, PUA, okay. Yeah, if there are no other questions, then we will end a couple of minutes early, and thank you, Rod, so much for all of this really valuable information. And we will be sending out a link to the recording and the slides later, probably next week, early next week. And again, if you have other questions, please feel free to contact the DC Women's Business Center or any other small business service provider that you know who can give you some assistance with this. We really want to help all of these small businesses, women-owned and other-owned businesses, to access these funds in this really, really important and difficult time.
Yes.
So thank you again, Rod. Any final words?
All I can say is apply, apply, apply as soon as possible, okay? Because I don't think the funds are going to last until March 31st. So really, please do apply as soon as you can.